Good evening and welcome to the big story here on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. I am Chika Ago. Still on the judgment of the National Assembly Elections Petitions Tribunal sitting at the Tafawa Balewa Square, Lagos. Recall that the tribunal declared the election that produced Eti-Osa of the Labour Party as the elected representative for Eti-Osa Federal Constituency as inconclusive. It also ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission to withdraw the certificate of return issued to Ata and conduct a supplementary election within 90 days in 33 polling units where it was discovered that elections did not hold. Following the judgment of the court, Ibrahim Obanikoro, the APC House of Reps candidate for Eti-Osa constituency, joins us on the big story here on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Chika.
Glad you can join us this evening on the big story. I want to first of all start by getting your reaction to the judgment that was handed down by the tribunal last week.
Well, to my understanding and to my belief, that's a plausible judgment, simply because we went there we cried to them and they listened to our cries and they took their time to look at the documents in front of them, and the documents spoke for themselves, and I believe that's what guided their decision to rule that the election was indeed inconclusive.
Right. I mean, but the numbers are staggering, right? As many as 30,000 people not voting. Voting not taking place in 33 polling units, across Eti-Osa constituency. How do you reflect on these numbers? What did they mean to you?
It's actually about 42 polling units, not 33, and it's that's one of the reasons why we went to court, because we felt a lot of people were disfranchised from voting, and these are people that are willing to vote. They took their time to go and get registered to vote. They took their time to went back to get their PVCs, and they were ready to vote. But unfortunately, on that day, in some places, INEC was just not able to get there. There was no.
I mean, tell us what was your own experience? Because I mean, what did you see when you went out that day? What were some of the things you were accosted with?
My polling unit was fine. We voted accordingly in my polling unit, and majority of the polling units around me here in Ikoyi, there was no issues. But when you get to Oniru side, Ikate, Igbo Efon, Ogombo, and Iranla, Shongotedo, I think we had about 2 in Igbo Koshu as well. These are places where the issues were, and they were unable to vote. I wasn't physically there, but from the reports from our agents and from documents issued by INEC from EC 40G, which simply says that election did not hold in these polling units. And these are the things that we went to court with, to say that, look, a lot of our people were unable to vote on the February 25th, and we want them to vote because we believe that their votes will definitely tilt the results of the election.
Right, and so now we're here, we're seeing INEC say, we're seeing the court rule, and grant you what many people are calling a second chance, right? I want us to sort of look at what's INEC, or what is expected of INEC this time around, because that was an election that they had planned for years before then. And to not have, or to have the sort of logistics problems that we had on that day, I wonder if in your mind it's telling just, the sort of system that we have become, in many ways, a victim of.
Well, I'm not going to take credit away from INEC. I want to believe they tried their best. But unfortunately, I guess the best was not just enough, and I know I can't speak for them, but I know that they also have learned their mistakes from the last election, and I'm sure they'll be ready to do better. And it's all over the world. It's not just in Nigeria. I remember in the US as well. While back when I was in school, in one of the elections, it was I think it was a local election as well. It was declared inconclusive back in Minnesota, and they had to. A few days later, they had to come back to conclude the elections, and so it's not. And I remember Al Gore had to go to court as well, take George Bush to court because he wasn't happy with the outcome of the result. He went to court, and though the court ruled not in his favor, but at least he went there to exercise his franchise, his freedom, to feel like, I feel cheated, and the only way I can seek redress is through the court, and which is what we have also done. We felt a bit cheated and slighted, and the only option we have was to proceed to the judiciary arm of government, and they did their job.
Right. There was also the issue of Eti-Osa's nomination. Right, I don't know if that's also in your prayer.
Well, it was in our prayer. I just didn't want to go into it because, to the best of our knowledge and with documents that we have, he is not a member of the Labour Party. Right. And the Constitution says that you have to be a member of a party to contest for elections, because we don't have room for independent candidate yet. And the documents are there in front of the judges as well. But to the best of their wisdom, they decided it's a pre-election matter, meaning it's an internal affair that we have, that it's none of our business. And I just feel it's a bit unfair, because if some of us subject ourselves to the rigorous process of electioneering, and then some people just come through the back door or cut short the process just to be on the ballot, I think it's setting a bad precedent, because we're saying no independent candidates, but at the same time we're giving room for some people to just go in through the court to get onto the ballot. I went through DSS screening, I went through my party screening, and so many other screenings that we went to just to get on the ballot. These guys didn't do that. Atta didn't do that. He just ran to court, went to get a court injunction, and the court didn't even look at the because when you go to court, whatever you take to court, that the court will base their judgment on. They didn't look at their credentials. They didn't look at whether they are members of Labour Party or not. As long as what they came to get, which is, according to the court, it's their constitutional right to be allowed to be voted for. And the court granted that INEC open your portal or include these guys manually, let them be voted for. And that's how he got on the ballot.
Right. And I mean, not being able to challenge that, sort of, I don't know if you think it presents whether you think it presents a morality problem or you think it presents a legal problem, because the court is now saying that you can't actually be, you can't interfere in another party's issue, right, if you're not a member. And we saw how that played out too in the judgment that was handed down to at the Presidential Tribunal as well, right, where people tried to challenge Vice President Kashim Shettima's nomination, and the court said, look, you have to stay away from the APC's business if you're not APC. Do you think that going forward, that sort of precedence presents us with a moral or a legal problem? How do you think of it?
Well, it's a moral and a legal issue that needs to be addressed. And on the issue of the vice president, his nomination was questioned not as a member of the APC, but that he had picked up a form to contest in the senatorial double nomination. That was his own issue. And the evidence and the documents speak for themselves. The moment he got picked as the vice presidential candidate, he withdrew his candidacy, and that's why somebody else picked up the ticket for the party. So I just felt that was a frivolous appeal from the petitioners in that case. He's a member of the party. He went through primaries, and the moment he got picked as vice president, he dropped the senatorial ambition and went with a joint ticket with the president of the nation today. So it's an issue that we need to sit down and look at. Like, we feel like it was a slap on all of us, because like I said, I went through so many screenings to make sure that yes, I'm indeed legit, I'm qualified, I have what it takes to contest. DSS have all my details, INEC have all my details, but here we are, the same ditto every other party. You have everybody's details, but you don't have that of Labour Party. Because immediately after elections, we did ask INEC, look, let's see these guys.
But you can't challenge that now.
Unfortunately, we can't. Though we're still looking at the options of whether to challenge that decision or not. My lawyers and I are still weighing the options. We've not decided on whether to go forward with challenging it or not. But it's going forward is something that needs to be addressed as a nation, and I'm aware that some of our colleagues have taken it up in the National Assembly and they are reviewing the Electoral act, especially because of some of the loopholes that we have seen in this last electioneering exercise.
There was also this issue of, and in many of the places in Eti-Osa federal or in Eti-Osa local government where elections took place, right, there were reports of violence, and a lot of this violence had, ethnic undertones to them, and that resulted in, maybe the cancellation of elections in some polling units. I mean, what happened in some places in Oniru comes to mind, right? There was racial profiling. They disrupted elections in many places, and it was almost as though that's the right to vote was the exclusive privilege of a certain group of people. Did any of that come to mind? And what did you think, or what do you think of your responsibility in those situations?
Well, like I said, I was around here in Ikoyi, and all my polling units and all the polling units around me, we didn't have any violence or civic unrest. But if I go by the result sheets, it would be tough for me to agree with you that there was pro-racial or ethnic profiling, because it was a keenly contested
no, I'm not saying it was everywhere.
Everybody turned out to vote. So it would be difficult for me to say, oh, these people were prevented or that people were prevented from voting. Like I said, I wasn't, there. I was primarily here within Ikoyi, but I heard of in some areas, majorly what I heard was that, they were not able to vote, partly because there was not enough ballot papers, and that got some of the guys very angry, and instead of going to INEC to complain, the judge decided to disrupt everything. I say, if I'm not voting, nobody's voting here. That I know happened, but any other form of violence, I'm not aware of. The ethnic profiling, the racial profiling, that I'm not. I cannot beat my chest to say people were not allowed to vote because of their ethnicity. And if I go by the results that like I said, was a keenly contested election, that it would be tough for me to say these are the people that voted and those are the people that didn't vote.
Right. So, but then again, in some places where these things occurred, do you perhaps think that there is a way in which our elections bring out what many people would say is the worst in us, right? Because we seem to live together every other day, but the moment it's time for us to choose the person who is supposed to work for our collective good, we flip on ourselves. And I wonder if there's something particular there's something that we do or not do as a people that contributes to that.
Well, if you were to ask me, everything would boil down to interest. Interest drives men, and the moment our interests don't align, we're going to clash, and that's pretty much what politics is all about all over the world. It's all about interest. Right. Even in your family, the politics within the family, once your interests don't align with that of your brother or your sister, you find yourselves banging heads, and that's pretty much what politics is, pretty much what election is about. So on election day, we all have interests. You're supporting party A, she's supporting party B, and the moment election is coming closer on election day, you are not my friend, I'm not your friend. Immediately after election, we become friends again. But at that moment, our interest is clashing, and my interests have to, supersede your interest. Our
interest is the collective good of our community, right?
Indeed, it is.
We want to actually see better.
I agree with you. Just that if you and I decide to go to Ikorodu today, there are numerous ways to get to Ikorodu. You can use Ikorodu Road. I can use Ekpe, or you can decide to go by water, and I can decide to go by land. The destination is Ikorodu. How we get there is what differs. But as long as we get to Ikorodu, that's the common goal. So, yes, the entire process is to make sure that we, make sure our country is better. The process or the process of getting there, which is our interest, is what differs. That's why some people are, people like us are, batified. Some will call themselves articulate. Some will call themselves obedient. And today, the batifieds, the bats have the day. So that's just what it is.
Right.
It's interest. My interest has to supersede your interest.
Right. At the center of this conversation today is this electoral umpire. That's that's the reason why we're having many of the conversations that we're having today. So I do want us to sort of have a conversation around INEC and how they serve elections in the country. Starting from, the fact that on election day, so we saw that they were uploading. Some people in their polling unit said, look, we couldn't get them to upload results. The fact that they could not upload results completely was part of the issues that many petitioners brought to the court, and we heard the justices say, look, the IRF is not a collation system, right? They made that clear. But when you go back to the days before the election, the weeks before the election, and you heard the way INEC was talking, this sort of gave you the confidence that, technology would save us. Recently, the chairman of the Inter-Party Advisory Council said that in the conduct of the 2023 general elections, INEC became overambitious. As someone who, whose political future is subjected to the efficiency of INEC, do you think that in the conduct of the 2023 elections, given where you are now, right, going back to the court, having to get an order saying, let's go back to the polls again, do you believe when, they say INEC was being overambitious?
Was INEC overambitious? What you also have to understand is that INEC as a body is filled up with humans, and to her is to be human. So as human beings, we are not perfect. If you are part and parcel of the election day, that day, you will understand that in some places it was humanly impossible for those INEC staff to transmit results immediately. I'll give you an example of some areas in Eti-Osa. They were voting till like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. They didn't start counting till like 12 midnight, 1 midnight. So it was impossible for them to transmit results to IRF. And I'm sure of a few other places like that happened. In some places, because of human factor as well, like I said, everybody's blood is hot on that day. PDP is shouting on them, APC is shouting at them, Labour is shouting at them. Everybody is shouting at these staff, people that some of them are doing this for the first time. They didn't have the experience. So they're busy, first hand, learning on the job, trying to make sure that they satisfy everybody and to ensure that by satisfy, that simply means they're being free and fair. And in doing that, for some reason, guys are even still seeing them as biased. So it's not easy being INEC on that particular day. And I know this because I was part and parcel of the election. In my own polling unit, as peaceful as my polling unit was, we still had issues where some people were still shouting them, why are they being slow? Why can't they, forget this process? And they are telling you no process can be forgotten or left. They have to do it in accordance to how they've been briefed in their office, so that nobody will come and start saying they didn't do this, they didn't do that. So it was a bit tough to expect them to transmit, and I'm sure maybe the INEC chairman too didn't expect that, or they didn't factor that into their meetings, that look, we might have these challenges to transmit almost immediately. But if I go back, the election was held on Saturday. By Monday, Tuesday, a lot of the results from Eti-Osa had been uploaded on IRF by Monday, Tuesday, because I know that some of the results we also got them from the IRF. some of the EC40G forms, we got it from IREV. So I wouldn't give them, I won't crucify them, but they can do better.
All right. And in the spirit of doing better, INEC has, well, from the day that they were given the judgment, they had 90 days to conduct fresh elections, right? Have you been in touch with INEC? Has there been any official communications to you as to what's going to happen? What's the timeline of events that you've been given?
Well, it's election within 90 days. Now, we don't know if the respondents are going to appeal. If they appeal, they have 21 days to appeal. And appeal takes another 60 days. So it's after that 60 days that the 90 days to election will start counting. So as we speak now, there's still a 21 days, well, less than 21 days now, window for us to find out if they're going to appeal or not. If they don't appeal, then after that 21 days, we're going to notify INEC that this judgment has been given. And the 90 days will start counting from the 11th of September that we got judgment.
All right. And where does that leave, your expectation of them? Because, like you said, there are many places, where INEC couldn't get to. So it's a logistical nightmare. We noticed that. I was out on the field. I saw these things myself. It's a logistical nightmare trying to, get these things done. But now it's all eyes on Eti-Osa. There's a lot of attention. There's a lot of focus. That's the one place where Labour Party did, managed to take a win in Lagos, right? That has been historically with your party. So what are your expectations of the electoral umpire, going into this one?
Seeing that it's just 42 polling units, I think they have the muscle to ensure that it's a seamless election. So I don't have any worries that of INEC conducting 42 polling units successfully. I don't have any worries about that. So I expect them to come out with their A game and to remain on their A game from the beginning of the exercise to the end of it.
Right. I mean, there's definitely a whole lot that we have to talk to you about. Unfortunately, we can't sort of go into details of your campaign just yet because INEC hasn't given the go ahead.
Yes.
Right. To do that, but we'll continue to keep in touch with you, and hopefully we'll learn just what other activities you've got planned in the weeks or days leading up to this election. So I want to say thank you very much for stopping by this evening.
Thank you.
I absolutely appreciate you. My guest this evening on The Big Story is Ibrahim Babajide Obanikoro. He is the All Progressives Congress House of Representative member for House of Representative candidate for Eti-Osa Federal Constituency. But he was also the member,
the 9th Assembly.
Or the 9th Assembly, representing Eti-Osa Federal Constituency at the House of Assembly. Again, Mr. Obanikoro, at the National Assembly, I beg your pardon. Mr. Obanikoro, thank you very much. Appreciate you stepping by.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for all that you do for our community, and thank you for representing the youths in a positive light.
Thank you very much. Mr. Babajide Obanikoro here on The Big Story on Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos. Stay with us. Good evening.